We believe that this mystery did not start with Sass's murder.
No, it all goes back to season 1, which, by the way, has more holes than Zach Galifianakis.
Your murderer has been after you since season 1.
Well, it looks like the actors do serve a purpose and actually help with confirming something that we've been talking about for weeks, and that's that at least one of the killers have been involved since the very beginning. Now, admittedly, there wasn't a lot to chew on this episode, but hey, doesn't mean we can't have some fun. We've got a murder to solve, as I'll be breaking down this 4th season of Only Murders in the Building, episode 7, spoilers ahead. As we open this episode with our trio on the run and with nowhere to go as they're in Charles's car, and remember, they are afraid for their lives right now, but that doesn't stop Oliver from preparing to send Loretta a breakup text, which he ultimately does. Now, the plan is to head to Charles's younger sister house, Doreen, and the only person who knows about this is Howard, as they arrive to Strong Island. As they enter the house filled with dolls, which serve as a replacement for her kids, or at least as Oliver says, we see Doreen's got a thing for Oliver while her husband and her are in a little bit of an argument because he likes to go to Hooters. Now, before moving on, let's talk about the title of this episode, which was Valley of the Dolls, which was a 1967 drama. Now, believe it or not, I actually saw this film back when I went to film school, and from what I can remember, we follow this character by the name of Anne, who didn't follow the traditional narrative of marrying and having kids and moving to the suburbs and just kind of being a housewife, and she was deemed crazy amongst her peers from that decision. And I remember the movie tackling themes like heartbreak and addiction and tragedy. Now, the only connection I can make between the film and this episode, besides the doll addiction by Charles' sister, is that Doreen kept thinking how people thought that she was crazy and too emotional for having feelings. Now, for those that have seen the film, what connections did you all make between that movie and the title of this episode? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, early in this episode, we find out that there was some tension between Charles and his sister. When they were kids, there was some incident involving Doreen, and that caused a rift between the siblings for years. As we head to the next morning, surprise, Howard spilled the beans on the location as Bev arrives. Now, we can clearly see that Bev is stressed out because the studio is potentially going to pull the plug on the film. Now, Bev isn't the only visitor in this episode, as the actors also arrived. Even recently shot Zach Galifianakis is here as well, disturbing Mabel from the case. Meanwhile, we see Oliver sharing his woes with Doreen over drinks, but in comes another visitor, and it's Loretta, and she walks in on a bit of an awkward situation. I would love to know the behind the scenes budget on this episode, because this has to be one of the most expensive episodes of the series with all these Hollywood stars and icons in this one location. Now, after sharing a laugh, we see Loretta and Oliver clear up the confusion about the phone situation in last week's episode, as the lovebirds are now finally back on the same page. Now, while we get some shenanigans in the background, we see Doreen and Charles having a conversation about arguments and emotions. Loretta reintroduces herself to Eugene and offers Mabel advice about allowing the actors to help with this case. Now, Bev, she's drunk at this point in the episode, and it has to be one of the funniest moments to me as she shares her feelings towards her actors. Now, back in New York, we catch up with Howard, who's looking into who's been cashing in those checks at the bodega. Now, during this visit, we see that Howard discovers that there are multiple people signing under the name of Dudenoff. Now, back with the main story, we see Mabel takes Loretta's advice and lets the actors in on the case, all while Oliver admits what the phone call was about in his failed proposal. Now, his terrible decision making with Loretta catches up to him after he tells her about him posing as Ronnie, and now this lovely couple is back to square one. But just when things couldn't get more ridiculous in this episode, after trying to apologize, a fight breaks out between Doreen and Loretta, and honestly, at this point, I just figured this was a bottle episode and we weren't going to get many clues to the case, so I just accepted the madness, and this fight was a highlight to me because honestly, seeing Loretta and seeing Charles' sister fight, but also just seeing Meryl Streep fighting Melissa McCartney is pretty damn funny to me. As we get towards the back half of this episode, we get a brother and sister moment between Doreen and Charles after bonding over their relationship with their distant mother, and they promise to keep in touch with each other more often. Now, after a long nap, Bev got on the horn with the studio, and the movie's now back on track. Now, speaking of back on track, we see Loretta and Oliver make apologies to one another, and she actually proposes to Oliver, and he says yes. As we wrap up this episode, we head to the next morning where the actors put together a murder wall, and the case is closed, at least in their eyes. As they bring up all the clues from season 1, which I mentioned weeks ago.
Who poisoned Winnie? You thought it was Sting. You know what? It wasn't Sting, and then you just dropped it.
Look at the note on your door.
End the podcast or I will end you. See this smudge mark? That was written by a left-handed person.
How could you know that?
Because I studied handwriting.
Note on Jan's door.
I'm watching you.
Has figured this all out. Maybe that's what you wanted to tell me.
We wrap up with finally meeting Doreen's husband, Big Mike, as he gives a message to our trio.
He knows who killed Dudinoff. Yeah, I wrote it down so I get it right. It wasn't just one person cashing his checks. He found 5 different signatures with one phone number. Whatever a Westie is, Howard says it was all of them.
As our final shot of the episode shows Howard watching the tape back, and all of the Dudinoff signatures came from the tenants of the Westies, as he decides to call the number, and we see who answers, and they say,
They know.
So let's just talk about that they know last moment of the episode. I have a feeling that that isn't anything to do with the murder, but rather about their whole rent scheme. Now, if you all remember, I said it a couple weeks ago when they announced that this show will be having a season 5, that this season will probably end on a cliffhanger. Like I've said before, I believe the Westies are up to no good, but I don't think they're murderers, and I think instead it just has to do with them dealing with fraud. But I do think since we do have 2 killers this season, we'll probably get the answer to who killed Dudinoff, but not who killed Sass. And the whole killer has been there since the beginning will probably get revealed in the next season. Now, with all that being said, let's take a look at my suspect list after this week's episode. And honestly, I have no changes since last week's episode. Again, this is the stereotypical what they call a bottle episode in the world of television. We really didn't push the narrative of the story forward until like the last 2 minutes. There wasn't much to take away besides Loretta is willing to fight for her man, and that might come in handy later point in the season because we know Oliver doesn't really defend himself too well. But I will throw a Hail Mary into the stratosphere, so hear me out with this one. What if Charles's sister killed Sass? So what if Doreen got jealous of her brother and his relationship with Zaz, which is more of a brother-sister relationship than they have? And we know Big Mike is a cop, and yeah, that's a pretty dumb theory, I know, but seriously, besides the last 2 minutes and the whole Dudinoff casting and check reveal, what else did you all take away from this episode as far as what it pertains to the mystery and who could be the killer or killers? Did the dolls have a deeper meaning or a metaphor? Did Doreen thinking that others looking at her crazy have a deeper meaning? Bev and her relationship with the studio? Where's Jan? Who's been watching them since season 1? Listen, did this episode have anything going on for it that I'm missing? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, as far as next week goes, it is titled Lifeboat, and the synopsis reads, Charles, Oliver, and Mabel combine forces with the film actors in an epic showdown against the Westies. You can't handle the truth. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're going to find out that the Westies aren't the killers, but again, it has everything to do with their scheming with the rent situation. But hey, I could be wrong, and maybe the Westies are the killers for the Dudinoff case, but it still leaves us with the killer of who killed Zaz. That's gonna end this week's breakdown of only murders in the building. Overall, I thought this episode was very funny, but again, it was a bottle episode that didn't really offer too much to the main case. But again, I had fun seeing all these icons in one room having a good time. So now it is your turn to go in the comments and let me know what you all thought about this breakdown and thought about this episode. What Easter eggs, deeper meanings, what theories do you all have after watching this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you stuck around to this point in the video, I can't thank you enough for the continued support. You all are awesome. Do me a favor, put in the comments right now, #StrongIsland. As always, I'll be back to discuss next week's episode, so if you guys appreciate these breakdowns, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button, hit the share button, and share this with anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. And also, if you haven't already, if you've been here for the past 7 weeks and you haven't subscribed, do me a favor, hit that subscription button and also hit that bell notification. That way you don't miss out on all my videos. Don't forget, you all are amazing, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.